Hey, Myles here at Tactical Hyve. It is Monday, so that means another dry fire video. We are going to continue talking about taking multiple shot engagements, but this time we're going to start focusing in on recoil management so that you can take more accurate shots sooner, aka faster. With today being a dry fire session, a lot of you are going to be racking your slide after each shot. So you're gonna break the shot, rack the slide. To get the most out of your training, I recommend using a dry fire mag, who coincidentally are sponsoring today's video. And the dry fire mag is simple as this. It's a magazine that you insert into your gun. And from here, you can begin taking shots without resetting or racking the slide. And you can get the exact feel of your trigger, the trigger reset, and we are going to create a video down the road and explain why this is so important. You need to have your exact trigger and the exact feel of your trigger. We haven't discussed it. It's much more, the dry fire mag's utility is much more than just not having to rack the slide. There's a lot to do with the trigger. And in this series, we haven't covered trigger control yet, but we will. So I do recommend getting a dry fire mag. If you guys want to pick something up, make sure you use the code TACHYVE, and there's a link below. You'll get $10 off. And yeah, you can start using this, and you're going to see, I'm going to be using this in the dry fire sessions we have, the videos, because it's just a useful tool, and I recommend you guys use one. So the past several weeks, we started talking about grip and how you can use grip to improve muzzle control, right? This muzzle rising, getting it back on target so that you can take shots sooner. In a similar manner, there's something that you can do to better manage recoil. And recoil is the rearward force of a pistol. When you take a shot, there is a equal and opposite reaction. So the bullet's coming out this way, you're gonna feel force backwards. And you need to be able to manage that force so that you can take shots sooner, just like we were managing muzzle flip better, so that we can bring this down, keep it steady, and take shots. A lot of people think that recoil is primarily all about grip and what's happening in the upper body. Now, it all contributes. There's a lot of things that you can do to improve your recoil management, but we're going to be focusing on one that's often neglected, and that is your stance. Okay? Your stance is going to be your shooting platform, and there's a lot of things we can discuss, but we're going to focus in on just one thing today. When you have a good stance, or let me backtrack here. Imagine someone shooting a big shotgun or a machine gun. Do they stand up straight shooting that gun? No, they don't, because there's a lot of force moving back. What do you typically see them do? They're leaning into that gun because there's that rearward force. Imagine this was a big elephant gun, some big, huge gun. If this is moving back, there's no way I want to shoot it with my body straight. For some of you, you might think like you're shooting pistols and it's not really needed, but I guarantee you, if you are a beginner, based on your rate of fire, and there's a lot of variables you have to consider because it depends on your caliber, your weight, so on and so forth. But what you're going to see is, yes, people can shoot their gun rapid fire, and maybe they're not moving far back, but if you video yourself, most of you are going to see, if you shoot very fast, you're going to see some movement in the muzzle. It's going to go up. And if you recall in our previous videos, which if you haven't watched, I highly recommend you watch them. There's a playlist below in the description. The idea to taking multiple shots is we want to get this muzzle, the gun, pointed down to exactly where we want to shoot again quickly, right? And we want it to come back down exactly where we're looking. If you do not have a good stance, even if you have good muzzle control with the grip practices we've talked about, if you don't have good recoil management, your muzzle might return back to exactly where it's supposed to, but your body's moving back, so now I'm exaggerating, my muzzle goes up, all right? So when we dry fire this, it's relatively simple to add this in, but the idea is we're trying to ingrain it into our subconscious, which is why we're going to go over what we're going to be doing. And in terms of what you're doing with the practice, like what you're doing with your sights and your trigger and your grip, nothing changes from the previous weeks. We're just going to add something, and you're going to do lots of reps of it on top of, adding it on top of what we've already done. So again, it's burnt into your subconscious. So what you're going to do is an exercise without your gun for a second. I'm actually going to put this down and demonstrate what I'm talking about. But you need to find the balance point where you're not going to be pushed back with your gun. Okay, holding your gun. What do we mean by that? Okay, so I'm going to put this gun away and explain what I mean. So this works easier if you have a partner, and you can do two different things. First, you're going to get into any shooting stance. Notice we've never really talked about, you know, the details to it because that's not super important. What's more important is where your center of gravity is. What I mean by that is you're going to get in your stance, pretending like you're gripping a gun. And notice how I'm not crossing my fingers like this. I'm going to hold it just like this, like I would have a proper grip on my gun. And you're going to get into a stance here. And you're going to have a partner pretend to be Mr. Recoil and literally hit your fists with the same amount of pressure, with comparable pressure as to the caliber that you're shooting, right? Maybe a 9mm, 40 cal, 45 cal, whatever it is, okay? So you don't want your partner just lightly tapping you. You want your partner to hit you hard enough that they're simulating real recoil. And I'm going to bring Charles up, and he's going to be Mr. Recoil here. I'm going to stand up straight, and he's going to give me a pretty good hit. Now I want you to pay attention to my shoulders, okay? So I'm here, I'm not in a good stance. Notice how I've just moved back just like that, because I was just standing stiff, just like this, right? Even if I absorb some of this, go ahead. See, I'm still moving. Even absorb some of this recoil with my arms, I'm still moving back, okay? So what you want to do, this, again, we're just covering one element here. You want to find that balance point. You want to kick your hips up, move your hips out, lean a little bit forward, and find the point where when recoil happens, you're not really moving. So what you're going to be looking at, and your partner, you're paying attention to your shoulders. I'm going to let up a little bit. Look at my shoulders. See how I'm moving back? I move back to my starting position, but notice, if this was a real gun, notice, go ahead and hit the bottom part here. See how the muzzle's up, and now it takes a long time for me to be able to take that second shot. But if I have good center of gravity here, notice where the muzzle is, it's still pointing relatively straight to the target, okay? So getting a partner is gonna allow you to do that. And the learning here happens, so this is validation where once I find this balance point here, I need to remember my position. This is the ideal position you want to have the best recoil management, okay? Because if I just do this quickly and I find this, I do this drill, I do this with my partner and everything works out, but I'm like, okay, I got it, and I forget it, I don't remember my position. Now I do it again. It's not, the learning is not happening there, okay? So you need to slow it down. So this is one way you can find out where that balance point is, and then you need to memorize it. Now we're gonna demonstrate another exercise you can do, still dry fire, but this time with a pistol. A second method you can use with a partner that builds off of what we just did, you're still going to be dry here, okay? And you can keep your finger off the trigger. What you're going to do is you're going to get in your stance. I'm going to get into a bad stance first. What he's going to do is he's going to rack the slide. He's going to pretend to be Mr. Recoil, right? So a shot breaks. I'm going to have a bad stance. Look at my shoulders. See how I'm moving back? Yes, I am returning back to my position, but notice it takes a long time. Now, if I remember that balance point from the previous dry fire exercise, I'm gonna get a little low, hips are back a little bit, and I'm leaning forward a little bit, so my center of gravity is forward. So now when he racks it, notice how things return better. And I'm not really moving far back. So this is just another exercise to establish your balance point. Now what we're going to do is we're gonna remember that positioning and then continue our dry fire exercises. Now that you've established your balance point, here is where the true exercises come in, where the true learning comes in. You need to memorize that and do that moving forward. Anytime you're doing dry fire, okay, that's going to be the ideal. Now you can break through from the ideal during practice in terms of like in realistic situations. You might not be able to shoot from that perfect stance, but you know the ideal, always train towards the ideal, so you'll be closer to the ideal under stress. So you're going to be using any type of, any of the many different exercises and programs we've done in the previous weeks with dry fire. You can do anything. You can literally take what we did last week and do it all over again, but you now want to have a good stance and you want to reinforce this stance. Every time you're doing trigger presses, transitions, reset and prep, you have this good stance. And now what I'd like to do for this dry fire session, all right, you're going to ask yourself certain questions. We had a checklist in the previous videos. Now the checklist or the question you need to ask yourself after each rep is this. So let's say, okay, I'm going to do a draw to 2 shots. And I'm working my reset and prep. Everything we've discussed in previous videos. As I mentioned, if you're new to this series, watch the videos and the playlist. Everything is going to make a lot more sense. But let's say I'm doing this. I present. I take 2 shots. Now, what you want to ask yourself before you end the rep is, do I have a good stance? Am I leaning forward? Do I have a good center of gravity? keep in mind that the amount of lean that you have is going to vary because of your body size, the caliber you're using, all of that stuff. There's a lot of different things. But keep in mind that every single gun you use, also your balance point, your center of gravity may adjust, because let's say you're shooting a 9mm, now you begin to shoot a 10mm gun, your balance point will adjust. Okay, so just keep that in mind. But whatever it is, for whatever gun you're using, you are going to remember that. And now as you do your reps, 2 shots here, do I have a good stance? Yes, everything's good, check, finger out the trigger, do it again. Then present, do another rep. This is a very simple way to begin ingraining the proper center of gravity that you should have to manage recoil the best for your body type, as well as for the gun you're using, and potentially the rate of fire. Now that is something also, another variable. The faster you shoot, there's going to be a lot more recoil, so it can catch up with you. So what I mean by that is you really need to take this seriously, because especially when we do live fire, you're going to notice this. You might be able to take 3 shots and you're steady, you're not really moving, but as soon as you start taking more than that, you move little by little. And if you're videoing yourself, you're going to see that. So you need to understand that the faster you shoot, it's an accumulative effect on your body. That recoil is going to build and you might begin to move. So you need to be firm and focus on that balance point. It's not moving the entire time, no matter how many shots you're taking, from 2, 3, 4, 10, whatever it is, right? So very simple exercise for today. There's nothing magical about it, but do those 2 exercises and I promise you that live fire exercise on Thursday are gonna be a lot easier. And now overall, when we combine this, we combine recoil control with our stance, with proper muzzle control, you're going to have your split times really decrease and you're going to be able to shoot faster. So I hope you guys liked today's video. It's really simple. It's a great way to manage recoil, and I will see you guys on Thursday for our live fire session.